Someone says one sentence, and suddenly something feels off. Maybe it is a date who is too controlling. Maybe it is a job posting that sounds too good to be true. Maybe it is a message asking for money. Maybe it is a person who gives a story that keeps changing. You may not have proof yet. You may not know exactly what is wrong, but something in your mind says, pay attention. That is a red flag. Today, people use the phrase everywhere: dating, work, scams, health, friendships, business, parenting, social media. But before red flags were screenshots, warning signs, and relationship advice, they were actual flags. Bright pieces of cloth raised so people could see danger from a distance. So why do we say red flag? And how did a real warning signal become one of the most common phrases for spotting trouble before it gets worse? I'm Earl, the creator of Everyday Sayings and Origins. To keep each episode consistent, I use my digital likeness. Now, back to the story. Today, a red flag means a warning sign. It does not always mean disaster has happened. It means something deserves attention. Something may be wrong. Something may be risky. Something may be unsafe, dishonest, unstable, or worth checking before you move forward. That is an important difference. A red flag is not always proof. It is a signal. It says, slow down, look closer, do not ignore this. That is why the phrase is so useful. Life is full of moments where you do not have the full answer yet. You only have a clue, a strange detail, a bad feeling, a pattern that does not fit, a warning sign that something might be wrong beneath the surface. Calling it a red flag gives that moment a name. It turns uncertainty into something visible. That is exactly what real flags were built to do. A flag can be seen from far away. It can rise above noise, distance, and confusion. Before radios, phones, flashing lights, or digital alerts, flags were one of the clearest ways to send a message. A person could raise a flag, and everyone who understood the code knew what it meant. Stop, danger, battle, warning, do not enter, pay attention. Color mattered because color could carry meaning quickly. Red was especially powerful. It is bright. It stands out. It catches the eye. It is connected with blood, fire, heat, danger, and urgency. Even if you do not know the full history, red feels like a color that demands attention. That is not an accident. Across many settings, red became a color of warning. A red light tells traffic to stop. A red sign warns of danger. A red mark on a paper points to an error. A red alert means something serious. And a red flag means something should not be ignored. The phrase grew from that same visual logic. When people saw a red flag, they were meant to notice it. They were meant to change their behavior because of it. In military settings, red flags could signal danger, defiance, battle, or no safe passage. At sea, flags helped ships communicate across distance. On land, flags could organize movement, warn people away, or mark danger. On beaches today, a red flag can warn swimmers about dangerous water. In racing, a red flag can stop or suspend the action because conditions are unsafe. On firing ranges, construction sites, and danger zones, red flags can mark places where people should be careful. All of these uses share the same basic idea. The red flag appears before or during danger. It does not politely suggest. It warns. That is why the metaphor works so well. A red flag in a relationship is not literally a cloth banner. A red flag in a job offer is not waving on a pole. A red flag in a scam message is not stitched from fabric. But the function is the same. It is a signal that says something here may not be safe. Look closer before you keep going. That is the heart of the phrase. A red flag is a visible warning. And in modern life, warnings are not always visible until someone names them. Think about how people use the phrase in dating. A person is rude to the server. Red flag. They want commitment immediately. Red flag. They get angry when you set a boundary. Red flag. They tell stories that do not match. Red flag. In that setting, the phrase helps people separate charm from warning signs. It says, do not only listen to what someone claims to be, watch what their behavior signals. That is powerful because many problems do not announce themselves clearly at first. They appear as small signs, a pattern of disrespect, a little dishonesty, a need for control, a strange reaction to being told no. The red flag language helps people notice the early signal before it becomes a bigger problem. That is also why the phrase became so popular online. Social media loves short phrases that can label behavior quickly. Red flag does that perfectly. It is short, visual, easy to apply, easy to understand. It works in serious posts and jokes. People can say, "That is a red flag," and everyone knows the meaning. The phrase is flexible enough to be used in a safety warning, a relationship conversation, or a meme. That flexibility helped it explode in modern language, but the phrase can also be overused. That is worth saying. If everything becomes a red flag, the phrase loses force. A true red flag should point to something meaningful, a warning sign, a pattern, a risk, a concern that deserves attention. It does not have to be proof of guilt. It does not have to mean the situation is hopeless, but it should mean slow down and think. That is where the original image can help. A real red flag does not explain the whole danger. It does not give you a full report. It does not tell you every detail. It simply marks the danger so you do not wander in blindly. That is what the metaphor should do. It does not replace judgment. It begins judgment. It says, there is something here worth examining. That is why a red flag is different from a final verdict. If you see one warning sign, you may ask more questions. If you see many warning signs, you may change course. The flag tells you where to look. Your judgment decides what to do next. This distinction matters because people sometimes treat red flags like instant proof, but warning signs are not always proof. They are signals. A job posting with vague pay details may be a red flag. It does not automatically prove the job is fake, but it tells you to ask questions. A seller who pressures you to act immediately may be a red flag. It does not automatically prove a scam, but it tells you not to rush. A person who avoids accountability may be a red flag. It does not tell you everything about them, but it tells you something worth noticing. The phrase is strongest when it keeps that signal meaning, not paranoia, not panic, attention. That is the real purpose of a red flag. And that purpose goes back to the physical world. Imagine standing near a beach. The water looks beautiful. The waves may even look exciting, but a red flag is raised. You may not see the rip current. You may not understand the underwater conditions. You may not know what the lifeguard knows. But the flag gives you a warning before you are in trouble. That is exactly how many modern red flags work. You do not always see the full danger immediately. You see the sign first. If you respect the sign, you may avoid the danger. If you ignore the sign, you may learn too late why it was there. That is why the phrase feels so useful in scam awareness too. A scam often begins with signals, urgency, secrecy, pressure, payment by gift card, promises that sound too easy, a stranger asking for personal information, a message that pushes emotion before evidence. Each one is a red flag, not because one detail always proves the whole scam, but because the detail deserves attention. A red flag is how the pattern begins to show itself. That is also why the phrase fits your instincts. Sometimes people say, "I saw red flags, but I ignored them." That sentence is common because many people only understand the warning after the situation goes wrong. Looking back, the signs were there. A strange comment, a bad explanation, a moment that felt uncomfortable. At the time, they explained it away. Later, they realized the flag had been raised. That experience is very human. People often want things to work out. They want the job to be real. They want the relationship to be healthy. They want the deal to be legitimate. They want the person to be honest. So they step around the warning sign. They tell themselves it is probably nothing. That is why the phrase has emotional power. A red flag is not only a warning from the outside, it can also be a warning from your own attention, the part of you that notices something before you can fully explain it. That does not mean every uneasy feeling is correct, but it means the feeling may be worth investigating. The phrase gives permission to pause, and pausing can be important. Red flags are not only about danger, they are about timing. A warning is most useful before the harm is done. That is the whole point. A flag raised after the crash is too late. A flag raised before the crash gives people a chance to stop. That is why the metaphor works so well in racing. When a red flag appears, the race is stopped or controlled because continuing may be unsafe. The flag interrupts momentum. That is what a warning is supposed to do. It breaks the rush. It says, do not keep moving just because you were already moving. That applies far beyond racing. Do not keep sending money just because the scammer is pressuring you. Do not keep ignoring bad behavior just because the relationship started well. Do not keep accepting vague promises just because you want the opportunity. Do not keep walking forward just because turning back feels embarrassing. A red flag gives you a reason to stop and reassess. That is why the phrase has become so central in modern advice. It puts a simple label on the early signs people might otherwise dismiss. But again, the power comes from the old image: a piece of red cloth raised high, a signal visible from a distance, a warning before contact. The modern phrase may be digital, emotional, and social, but the old function is still there. See the signal, respect the warning, look closer. There is also a reason red works better than almost any other color. A blue flag might be calm. A white flag often means surrender. A green flag now often means permission or safety. But red carries urgency. It is the color of stop signs, brake lights, alarms, and danger labels. When people say red flag, the color itself does part of the work. You can almost see it. That visual strength makes the phrase easy to remember. It also gives us the opposite phrase, green flag. A green flag now often means a good sign, something healthy, something safe, something encouraging. That modern opposite exists because red flag became so recognizable. Once red meant warning, green could mean go. That shows how deeply the flag metaphor has entered everyday speech. People are not just describing danger anymore. They are building a whole color-coded language for behavior. Red flag, green flag, yellow flag, all of it comes from the same basic idea. Signals help us interpret situations before we fully enter them. That is why red flag is not just a phrase about the past. It is one of the most modern-feeling old expressions we use. It belongs equally to beaches, battlefields, racetracks, scams, dating apps, and workplace conversations. The setting changes, the warning stays the same. So why do we say red flag? Because red flags were used as visible signals of warning, danger, defiance, or a need to stop. Over time, the physical signal became a metaphor. Now a red flag can be any clue that something may be wrong. A behavior, a detail, a message, a pattern, a feeling that tells you to pay closer attention. The phrase survived because it does exactly what a real flag does. It rises above the noise. It catches your eye. It tells you not to move forward blindly. A red flag is not always proof that something bad will happen, but it is a sign that something deserves a second look. And sometimes, noticing that sign early is what keeps a small warning from becoming a much bigger problem. If you enjoyed discovering the story behind this everyday phrase, subscribe to Everyday Sayings and Origins. Each episode uncovers the hidden history behind the words, phrases, rhymes, and traditions we use without thinking. I'm Earl. Stay curious, and I'll see you in the next origin. Peace.